So just went through this build for Tryndamere, but let's take a look at his constellations and do a breakdown, and then we can look at the other relics that can work for him and will be quite strong. So for his constellations, I think getting him to at least 3-star is really important. Getting the call to arms reduced by 2 every round is really good. With him, you tend to want to draft a lot of very strong units, and this call to arms lets you just summon units from the top of your deck. So you have to have the mana to be able to do this. So some of our builds will focus around making sure that we have the ability to cast this every turn and get those units out there. His 2-star is when allies attack, grant allies in your deck +1/+1. So this can be helpful, but I don't think it's really a necessary build around. You get the attack token every other turn unless you have his 6-star. And if you have his 6-star, I don't think you're really relying on this anyway. You're pretty much destroying them pretty quickly if you have his 6-star. So this I don't think is a huge benefit from my perspective. The treacherous terrain is nice just because sometimes with him having a higher cost units and things like that and needing 5 mana initially to cast Call to Arms, so you're probably not casting this on your first turn. You probably need to wait for some cost reduction to cast it, and so you're not necessarily getting big units out right away. So having a little bit of frostbiting and whatnot to keep the enemy at bay is quite helpful. And then, of course, any mana gems to get him to being able to cast things faster is great. So highly recommend getting those. Let's take a look at the relics. This is the relic build I was using. Echoing Spirit, getting more copies of him in your deck definitely makes it more likely that he will get picked by the Call to Arms, so that'll get him out there. If you don't have Echoing Spirit, you can always use the Chameleons. That will add more copies of him to the deck. So here, and you can even use like multiple copies of Chameleons if you want to, so you can put even more copies in the deck. Of course, this is only 2 copies per, whereas the Echoing Spirit right away adds 7 more copies. So even 1 Echoing Spirit is going to be better than 2 of these, but just depending on what you have, it can be valuable to just making sure that you get more of him in your deck. Then Portal Pals, I think this is really good if you have it. Just because this basically will make it so you can get almost free units that are really large and summon them out whenever he gets summoned. This is a summon trigger, not a play trigger. So if you summon him through the Call to Arms, you still get these units generated in your hand. You can potentially summon Tryndamere multiple times from Call to Arms, so you can have multiple Tryndameres on your board, and each time that you summon Tryndamere, you will get the Portal Pals. So really recommend this. There isn't really a replacement for it, but you can just go for bigger stats on him, or like I said before, more copies of him in your deck. But if you have this, definitely recommend using it, just because you can generate those units multiple times and they will likely be free. You can also go for, as we were talking about earlier, more spell-based builds. That way, you still need to get him onto the board. So, having the more copies of him in the deck. So, once again, if we grab the more copies of him first and we say, okay, let's just do like a green and blue relic build here. You say, where's the Chameleon's necklace? Here we go. So if you grab just like 2 of these, and then you were to grab Archangel's Staff, this will make it so it's a lot easier for you to cast that every turn. Get the, what's it called? You can you can get the call to arms. Sorry, had a brain malfunction there or whatever. You can call to arms, and you can be more likely to get this. You can also, of course, use Chemtech Duplicator. That way, when you cast the updraft, you summon 2 units instead of summoning 1, so that'll also increase your chances that you'll get a Tryndamere or other big units from your deck. So this can also be quite good. Basically, you want to focus again around those spells. Same with when you're getting your powers, that can be very strong. You can do other things that rely around summoning, multiple copies of Tryndamere. I don't think it's, the best way to go, but there are certainly things you can do with that. If you have things that trigger on summon, you can, give him Guardian's Angel, though when the first time he dies, he levels up instead of dying, so it's a bit harder to trigger like Guardian's Angel and things like that, where you can do things where when he's summoned, you get, epic items on things in your deck. You have more copies of him in there, so they're more likely to hit him with these, so you can potentially get like double attack or scout or other things, double stats. You can potentially get these on him by summoning him multiple times. This is quite viable, but yeah, just depends on what you're doing there. You could also, use Hymn of Valor, similar sort of thing. You summon him, you have mana, you can double his stats with this, get him again from the other copies that you have in your deck when he gets summoned, and then, can double his stats again, attack in. He has Overwhelm, so be really strong with items like this. This is more for, slower play. If you don't have his 6-star, you can rely more on things like this and just build up your board and then finally attack in and blow them out. But if you have his 6-star, this is really not going to be as strong. You're going to tend to want to just kill them in, 1 or 2 turns, basically. You can also do things with like Stalker's Blade. Again, this is a summon effect, so anything that has the summoned effect is going to be decent for him, and just making sure that you have enough copies of him that he's more likely to be hit. When you're going through an adventure, making sure you're hitting champion item nodes, getting copies of him. Also, when you're going through adventures, you want to be drafting big units. And if there's only, like small units and spells available, you tend to want to draft the spells rather than the units. That way the call to arms will hit your big units more likely than hitting small units. You don't want to add new small units to your deck. In fact, when you get the chance, you often want to cut your small units from your deck. So, you might need 1 or 2 just so you have some early turn plays that you can defend your board a little bit and block some of their attackers. But yeah, that's why getting that Frostbite 4-star is also nice, helps delay, so that you can be more likely to summon out Tryndamere with your call to arms, get cheaper call to arms, things like that. So yeah, no other big things to go around here. I think those are the main pieces. Just try to focus around his call to arms and playing that more often to summon things from your deck, and then buffing up your deck with stuff. I guess there's one other item that does, on the epic side, buff up your deck, and that would be the stacked deck, which can be quite nice if you're especially drafting a lot of cards, a lot of big cards. Then this will make them even bigger. So if we say stacked deck here, this can also be quite strong especially if you have his 6-star. This, because you're doubling the stats when you summon stuff, this can be very good for him. Those effective stats get doubled again. So yeah, it's great that when they get summoned, they'll be that much stronger. So that's about it for the breakdown. Let me know if you have any questions or other things that you're curious about with Tryndamere or other champions, and I'll do my best to answer them in future video. So have a good one, and we'll catch you next time.